Hello, my name is Malcolm Thomas, Head of Business Development for Sell My Financial Practice and Innovative Financial Group. Welcome to our Sellers Insights, where we provide educational material and practical tips to financial advisors who are looking to sell their practices. We want to make sure that you have the right information when you're searching for a potential buyer or a potential continuity partner for your business. Today, I'm joined by John Alabiso. John is the head of finance for Sell My Financial Practice and Innovative Financial Group. And John also is in charge of all our business valuations and deal structuring. And John, those are the two areas that I want to focus on with you today. You know, a lot of times financial advisors will come to us and ask, how much is my business worth? And generally that starts with a conversation around a business valuation. And while that's important, a lot of times what a buyer is willing to pay for a business isn't necessarily what comes out on the business valuation. It could be higher, it could be lower. So could you talk a little bit about, how a seller can use a business valuation to craft their own proposal for a potential buyer?
Absolutely. I kind of look at valuations as a benchmark or a starting point. There's many valuation vendors out there in the marketplace today. They use different valuation methods, whether it's a factor of revenue or a multiple of EBITDA or a discounted cash flow. So depending on what company you're using and their methodology of valuation, you're going to get a different number from everybody, but they'll all be in generally the same ballpark. So that's why I like to say it's a benchmark or a starting point. But really the best advice that I think I can give to sellers is to look at it from the buyer's perspective. Put yourself in their shoes. What your annual revenue looks like, specifically your recurring revenue from your trails or your advisory business, financial planning, things like that. And so when you know how much that is on an annual basis, and once you know a potential buyer, what their payout would be on that same business, you can easily kind of figure out the cash flow for them and what they can afford to pay. And that's really ultimately how you're going to kind of back into what that maximum number that somebody can pay for the business is.
I think that's a great point when you're selling and you're thinking about selling your business, to put yourself in that shoes of the buyer and realizing that a buyer is buying this business really for the future revenue and the opportunity to work with your clients, serve your clients ongoing, and generate revenue from that service and from the services that they're providing. So when you're thinking about that, a potential buyer would be willing to pay more if they see future revenue opportunities in that business versus they may, if a business is declining or the client demographics aren't attractive to the potential buyer, that could be a limiting factor when you're talking about what a buyer is willing to offer you for your business. John, could you talk about some of the most important factors that can significantly impact the ultimate purchase price compared to a valuation?
Yeah, I think the most important factor here would be how much of it you want guaranteed or are willing to protect by contingencies. Again, putting yourself in the buyer's shoes, if you want a fully guaranteed deal, that's, a lot of risk for a buyer to take on. It's not to say people won't pay them, but typically you're going to be pushing your limits at the valuation or coming in somewhere south of that. And, to further that thought, if you wanted a full lump sum, fully guaranteed, well, now you're probably getting even less. So that's, but if you're willing to take some risk on as the seller through contingencies, then the buyer has some risk mitigation. And so you're generally able to get a higher purchase price with those protections in place. Another one would be the length of term. So when we talk about cash flowing for a buyer, obviously, if they have a longer time to pay back the note, the monthly or quarterly payment would be smaller, and thus they have more to pay, right? So that's one that everybody typically looks at as a way to maybe, if they could stretch it a little longer, they can get a higher purchase price over the long run. And then the last one would be tax treatment, and that's extremely important. And so the buyer and seller are at opposite ends of the spectrum here when you're talking about tax treatment. Some portion of the deal is going to be 1099, which benefits the buyer because they can write it off dollar for dollar. And then the other portion of the deal is going to be long-term capital gains, which is great for the seller, but as a 15-year write-off for the buyer. So depending on the mix that a seller is comfortable with based on their personal tax situation, if they can take on a little more in 1099 income with the better write-off situation for the buyer, again, they might be able to get a higher purchase price for kind of making that concession.
All right, so there's a lot of different points here that you just hit on and that we can dig into. I want to go back and start with a term that you used that I know sometimes there's confusion around, contingencies. Can you give an example of what a contingency in a sale could be?
Yeah, so contingencies are it's really a measurement of a baseline. So a baseline would be set at the time you make your agreement or write up your contract. And so if you're setting the baseline, you're going to be on, it could be on assets, it could be on the number of clients, the number of households, the revenue. You're going to agree to a baseline and what that number is, and then measure it a period of time after the deal is effective. So in most cases, you're looking at like a 12-month window, right? So if we measured the number of clients and it had to be 90% of that target, we measure 12 months after the deal and see if 90% of the clients are still here. If they are, the deal would continue and pay as amortized originally. If it comes in something less than that 90% threshold in this example, then the capital gains portion of the deal would be reduced in proportion to the same percentage reduction.
So I know in a lot of cases, it's the buyer that is looking to put contingencies in the deal to help protect them on, potential client retention, right? Or protect the downside. But I think it's also important to think about as a seller, the more contingencies that you can put into this, generally, the higher the overall purchase price is going to be. And so these can really benefit you as a seller as well.
Absolutely right, and a really great point. As the seller, you're going to know these clients, the strength of the relationships, and your ability to transfer them. And in most cases, and what we see, people are typically retaining 90% of the clients without a problem. And so I would encourage sellers to not be necessarily scared off by contingencies. You're really just betting on yourself at that point. And again, that percentage is negotiable too, right? So maybe if 90 is not comfortable, maybe 85 is or something like that. But to your point, it's definitely a good way to maximize the ultimate purchase price you can get by allowing some contingencies into the deal.
John, I want to thank you for your time today and your insights on valuations versus offers and ways that sellers can start to think about this as they are approaching potential buyers for their business. If you want more information on continuity, succession, how to structure a deal, what are some of the considerations that you need to be thinking about as you are approaching potential buyers, feel free to visit SellMyFinancialPractice.com. Through the site, you can also reach out directly to our team. Just send us a note or schedule a call. Again, SellMyFinancialPractice.com. Thank you very much for joining us, and talk to you soon.